Hey guys, the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is coming out in the spring of 2023, and that's only a few months away, and we barely know anything about this game. I actually do think there's going to be some sort of direct in the next month or so to give us some more information about this, but right now we know nothing. I actually made a video right here predicting what that direct might look like. It was kind of an early prediction video, but still fun anyway. But in this video, I really want to talk about what we can expect from Breath of the Wild Part 2, some gameplay elements, and what we're actually going to be doing in this game. If you're new to my channel, definitely think about subscribing, hitting that like button, all that other YouTube stuff. But let's get right into this video and talk about gameplay options and what we're going to be doing in Breath of the Wild Part 2. Gameplay is probably the most important part of any video game. I know graphics and art style are also very important, but it really comes down to gameplay. It's what you're doing moment to moment and what you're really doing within a game that really separates itself from other games. Breath of the Wild Part 1 was freaking amazing. You had a huge Hyrule to explore, you had 120 shrines with different puzzles to conquer, and you had 4 divine beasts that were basically the dungeons for this game. I think it's really important that in Breath of the Wild Part 2, it really separates itself from its predecessor. We already know that you're going to be in the open world Hyrule again. It's probably going to be changed. We know we're going to be in the sky exploring and sailing around, and we're probably going to be spending a lot of time in the underground also. But in between that, what are we going to be doing? What kind of shrines or dungeons are we going to be exploring? I have a few ideas that I want to get into right here. So one of the biggest criticisms from Breath of the Wild Part 1 was there were no dungeons. Granted, we had those 120 shrines and the divine beasts, but we had no old school dungeons that were really a staple for almost every single Zelda game up until this point. So I think Breath of the Wild 2, they're going to be bringing back dungeons, but I think they're going to be totally different from anything we've seen before. Hear me out. I think there are going to be 8 unique dungeons. We're going to have a water theme, a forest theme, a lava theme, all these different themes. They're all going to look very different from the inside, but they're going to be much different than anything we've ever seen before. I think they're going to be massive. I think they're going to be so freaking big that they're almost going to be like their own open world game in itself. You're going to be able to beat these dungeons in many different ways, but hear me out on what I think is going to really separate this game from all the other Zelda games. I think the shrines from Breath of the Wild Part 1 are going to be in these dungeons, so hear me out. Let's say you go into a dungeon and each dungeon is so big there are actually shrines inside it that you need to find and explore and conquer. Let's say there's 15, 10, 20 shrines inside each dungeon. So a dungeon typically took between an hour, 2 hours to beat in prior games, but maybe in this new Breath of the Wild, each dungeon is going to take you 5, 6, 7 hours to beat because they're so massive. You have to explore every inch and cranny to find all these shrines within each dungeon. And also you're going to have a traditional dungeon within that as well. So not only are you going to have to conquer a 1 to 2 hour dungeon, get new items to explore and get around, but you're going to have all these shrines that also incorporate that item that you got within the dungeon. So these can make each dungeon very unique, and if they're different themed like I think they will be, each dungeon and each of its shrines will look very, very different from one another. I know one of the biggest critiques from Breath of the Wild Part 1 is all the shrines kind of had a very similar visual aspect to it. All of the divine beasts, granted there were different animals, but they all kind of look the same. Breath of the Wild Part 2, every single one of these dungeons gonna look totally different from one another, and each one of the shrines will, granted they'll all have the same theme, but be very different as well. Now, inside these dungeons, usually a traditional dungeon, you're getting some sort of new item to help you progress through that dungeon. Some items that I think can make returns from previous Zelda games. Probably the one that people have been clamoring the most is the hookshot. Just such a fun item to use, zipping from wall to wall, being able to reach areas you couldn't before because you just don't have the strength or you can't jump that high. So you use a hookshot and you get right up there. Another one that I really, really like from Skyward Sword, and I'm not a huge Skyward Sword fan, but I really like the beetle. The idea that Link could sit on the ground and use a remote-controlled beetle to explore the dungeon, not only that, pick up bombs, drop them off, it really makes for some fun gameplay. I really didn't like the motion controls in Skyward Sword with the beetle, but if they could figure out to use the controls, mapping it to a controller, I really think the beetle could be a really fun item to use. And then another item which we haven't really seen before, and this is more of a hypothesis, just a theory, we're going to be using more time travel, right? So we've seen on Link's hand in one of the trailers that he's able to send a boulder back up using time manipulation. Maybe there's a whole dungeon with many shrines that have to do with time. You have to reverse something, jump through an area, then let time go forward. You know, time in video games is something that's been used a lot throughout video game history, and it's really time for a modern Zelda really to manipulate time in a way that, you know, you could really solve a lot of puzzles, defeat enemies, defeat bosses, and I'm really excited to see what they do. And it'll be perfect for an item you pick up in one of these massive dungeons, maybe one of the first ones. Similar to how in Great Plateau, when you got all your weapons in your Sheikah Slate one at a time, maybe this game will be very similar. Each dungeon you progress, you get a different item, and granted you go back to the open world and, you know, anything goes, but maybe you could complete certain obstacles or quests if you have better items. So there might be a correct path of which dungeons are probably make the travel through Hyrule in the game easier, but you can do it any way you want. But I want to talk more about time travel. I love the idea of time travel in this game where maybe you beat something in the past, you could time travel to the future, and it really affects what you just did, affects the future. Like, let's say you move a rock in the past, you move to the future, and that rock is not there anymore, and underneath there's something else. Or maybe there's a ton of a huge wall, you break it down, and in the future you go, and because that wall was broken, water was able to flow, and you know, now there's a huge lake. I love time travel manipulation. I love movies like Back to the Future, or even, you know, Avengers Endgame, where things you affect in the past or do in the past affect the future. This is like a really crazy and mind-bending mechanic, but if the developers of this game can do it correctly, it can make for a freaking masterpiece. I mean, they've been making this game for like 6 years or 7 years, however long they've been making it. It is incredible what they're working on, and you know, time manipulation is something very, very tricky and easy to screw up. So I definitely think time travel and time manipulation is going to be a big part of this game. One other area that I think we're really going to be exploring a lot is the water. We know in Breath of the Wild Part 1 and Wind Waker very similar, you weren't able to go underwater and explore caves and explore what could possibly be under there. You were able to use one of your Sheikah Slate ruins to pull things up, but you're never able to go down, which was always like a big missed opportunity. But once you bring water and swimming underwater into play, it just opens up a huge bag of worms. Usually in video games, swimming underwater is not the best, so I understand why they didn't want to put that in the first game. But it's time for underwater swimming. Very similar to the New Horizon Forbidden West game. In the original, you couldn't swim underwater. Now you can. So I really think in this new Breath of the Wild Part 2, there's going to be underwater swimming. Maybe it'll reveal entrances to new shrines, new dungeons. Definitely so many secrets can be underwater, because, you know, that's where secrets usually are, right? Underwater. But, you know, you can have boss battles underwater, more battling systems underwater. I just want underwater to be fun, and if you can't make it super fun, don't have it in the game at all, please. All honesty, I really do think that the reveal for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Part 2 is going to happen within the next month. I mean, it's time for September Direct in a few short weeks. It's almost the end of August. So we could have answers to so many questions, but you know, for every answer we get, there's going to be more questions, because this game is still probably 4, 5, 6 months away, so they'll give us a little teaser. I would love just a 4-minute trailer. Just tell us what we're going to be doing, what the story is, show us some mechanics, please. So some of these gameplay questions, so what we're going to be doing and exploring, and who the bad guy is, and what happened to Zelda. I just need to know what's going on in this game. But guys, I really want to know, what do you think we're going to be doing in this next game? Do you like my idea with huge dungeons, with shrines within the dungeon? Do you think it should be more traditional with just regular dungeons and shrines randomly placed everywhere? Let me know. I really want to hear what you guys are expecting from Breath of the Wild, and when you think we're going to hear more information. Let me know right down in the comment section, and I'll be sure to get back to you. I get back to every single one of my comments. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I do a lot of trailer reactions to movies and TV. I talk about Zelda. I talk about all things Nintendo. So if you're interested in all that stuff, definitely think about subscribing, hitting that like button, so next time I go live with content, you get it right away. Guys, I am Turbo Jesse. I'll see you on the flip side.